Welcome to the Kids with Big Emotions podcast. I am your host, Andi Clark. Does your child often get stuck on one way of thinking, struggling to consider other perspectives or solutions? Maybe they have difficulty handling changes in plans or routines, or they become frustrated when things don't go as expected. These challenges can make everyday situations like group projects, transitions, sports, or even social interactions feel overwhelming for both you and your child. Cognitive flexibility allows children to adapt and thrive in the face of change, but it's also one of the most common areas where kids struggle. There is only one way to do things, they may think. They may struggle with change, transitions, perfectionism, fear of making mistakes. These all fall into that category, that executive functioning skill of cognitive flexibility. If you've seen these challenges in your child, you're definitely not alone. This is talked about so much in parent groups I'm with my clients, in my support circle. That perfectionism, that fear of making mistakes, that inflexibility of our child during the day can cause so many big emotions, so many explosions. And my hope in this episode today is that you will, and this lesson is that you will understand more of what cognitive flexibility not is, because I think you already understand what it is, but what is happening for your child. So you can see it through this different lens and start supporting your child. So with this lesson, this cognitive flexibility lesson, it's really essential to understand that this is a log skill. Now, in prior episodes, I spoke about the kindling skills: perception, attention, verbal, nonverbal working memory, and inhibition. All of these skills play a part in cognitive flexibility. So if you have not listened to those episodes, I highly recommend that you go back. If you haven't, if you're in my support circle where all of these lessons are, I highly recommend that you start at the kindling skills, because that will help you understand more of what I will be diving into today with this cognitive flexibility, because so many of those pieces play a part in cognitive flexibility with our kids. I will let you know that if you're listening to this on the podcast, this is the last lesson that I will be airing for you. Everything else from here on out is solely in the support circle. All of the other lessons of the log skills: self-monitoring, self-modulation, time sense, pacing, self-correcting, planning, anticipation, analyzing, generating, associating, prioritizing, organization, decision-making, all of those are in my support circle. And in the support circle as well, that's where I help you understand for each of these how you can be supporting your child. And then we also dive into, that's where I can answer all of your questions and everything as well that come up, so we can really personalize it to yourself. So the link for the support circle is down below in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast, or if you are in the support circle, you're already here and it's exciting to have you. So the definition of cognitive flexibility is the ability to adapt to new information, changes, or unexpected challenges. It allows children to shift their thinking and adjust to different perspectives and find alternative solutions when their first plan doesn't work. So this isn't just about solving problems. It's about like this resilience, this adaptability, this flexibility. When we're getting all of these twists and turns, it's managing transitions. It's navigating social dynamics. Cognitive flexibility, it really helps your child stay balanced and open to new possibilities. I mean, this isn't even about kids nowadays. I mean, we see this social media. This is such a great one with social media. We see in social media that, like, the algorithms, if you start clicking on something like, so just for example, I've recently what keeps going across my feed is this one, oh my gosh, I can't remember his name, but he's a chocolate maker and he makes these sculptures out of chocolate. So because I've clicked on it, because I've liked it, that's what I see a lot of. Curling. I have a curling group that I run to help all of the curling coaches in the Toronto area. I am always watching curling. So I'm getting all of the curling feed that goes. It's these algorithms. The thing though is if we have something that can be opinionated, so let's talk about lockdown, vaccination, no vaccination, mask, no mask. If you were clicking on any of those for one or the other, then you start getting these views only of the one side. They start sending you one side of the views. This happens in politics with so many things in this world where there's one side or another. And we can start getting this ability to adapt to new information. So let's say something new comes about the opposing decision, that's not the right word, the opposing opinion. When there's like adapting to changes or unexpected challenges, if we were so set on this one side completely, and never, ever, ever get to see the other side, never see that there are other opinions and why these other opinions, just even to understand and know why somebody thinks and feels another way. It doesn't mean you have to change your opinion, but it's that cognitive flexibility that I saw so much during lockdown. Here, we were in lockdown for a couple of years, that so many people went to one side or another and were very inflexible about even hearing the information of the other side. And this is what we deal with on a daily basis with our kids, where they are so set on one side or another. I know even with my child, like if I say a bowl in its plate, or if I say a spoon in its fork, I'm like, put your spoon away, or put your cutlery, like put your fork away. So it's a spoon, you know, eat over your bowl. It's a plate, it's just, they're not flexible at all to anything, to changes in schedules, changes in times. There can be so many different ways that it affects these kids. The perfectionism, can't make mistakes. It can affect them in so many different ways. And I do see though that social media has really, really been polarizing people to one view or another, and not having people see how many different choices and options out there, that I feel that cognitive inflexibility has been increasing in all people recently, due to how good the algorithms are at getting the information that we want and hearing the side of certain things that we like and want to hear. So much so that is actually causing us to be less flexible in our thinking as opposed to what we used to be. So perfectionism, let's dive into this. When a child has perfectionism, what it happens is in their brain, they have this thing that mistakes are all bad. There's no flexibility in that thinking about mistakes. My son never colored when he was younger because he felt that if he went outside the line a little bit, he made a mistake and that coloring was just bad and it was horrible and he would rip it up. Circle. If he didn't make a perfect circle, and this kid has such amazing visual that he could see discrepancies in somebody's circle. If he did not do a perfect circle by hand, it was wrong. So doing any art, certain art pieces that the teacher would ask them to do would end in tears and frustration and huge meltdowns. Soccer. When he played soccer, he expected that he would score a goal every single time he kicked a ball towards the net. And if not, he failed. It was a mistake. It was like, mistakes are bad. It's like this flexibility can play in so many things, in the way that they do things, in stopping our kids from doing so many things. Like my son actually doesn't play group sports for a couple of different reasons. One is the cognitive flexibility. He feels he's learning now, and huge headway. We were curling at a club. Well, we still do, and they love it. There's one club that isn't as structured. Kids go on the ice, they kind of do their own thing. My son would go on and kind of lead the other kids, even though he's the younger one. And it really worked well for him. The other club we go to is where coaches actually help you with your skills. They correct your mistakes. They help to improve your game. And he now goes there and he doesn't melt down when the coaches are talking to him. There are some days where his body is stressed and he can't handle it, that he doesn't deal well with them correcting him on anything. But for the most part, I'm going to say 95% of the time, he's actually okay with the coaches saying things to him now. Whereas he used to look at that as basically them saying he's done wrong and he is not a good player. Meanwhile, he's actually a really good player. He could be a better player if he worked on being more flexible in his thinking and looking at any mistakes that he did make as being, what's it called? Looking at his mistakes as being a learning opportunity, being like, oh, okay, what could I improve on the next one to make that better? Once he starts really diving into that, he could like fly with so many sports. And we're working on it, and he's come a long way. And I'm super proud of him, like super proud of him as to how far he's come. But perfectionism can rule so many things in our kids' life, stop them from doing things, help the anger, the explosions if they are doing things. It is fascinating how it can get in their heads and change things. So cognitive flexibility builds on the foundational skills, as I mentioned at the start of this. And it helps sustain executive functioning tasks as they become more complex. So what allows children to shift perspectives, adjust their thinking, find alternative solutions when things don't go as planned? In order to do this effectively, they have to draw from their kindling skills. So perception, this is one of the kindling skills. If you have not watched those lessons, I'd highly recommend you go back to, and in this podcast, I'd suggest that you go back to those episodes, on the episode on perception, attention, verbal, nonverbal working memory, and inhibition. So these play such a large role in cognitive flexibility. So with perception, if they notice that something isn't working, or when a change is needed, or they perceive that if something isn't working, it's never going to work, or that when a change is needed, they don't want to make a change because they felt that this is the way that they are going to do this, and this is the way that in their mind it's going to work, even though they keep putting that square peg in a round hole and it doesn't keep fitting. Like my son would keep doing the same thing over and over again, keep pushing the buttons over and over again. I wonder why it's not why the result isn't changing. Or we also, as I spoke of, think of mistakes, all mistakes is bad. That's a perception thing. So and the same thing, like perceiving that maybe it's okay for somebody to have a different thought, opinion, or view. And it's okay to ask them why they have these feelings. And it's okay to even change your mind. That's the thing too. I know for me, I used to think it was not okay to change my mind. Once I changed it, even if I realized that what I was thinking was not correct or wasn't the right way, or I should change it, I wouldn't, because I felt that was bad, because I had one way of doing things and it should only be the first way. It's so fascinating how perception plays a part in this. And once we start understanding how much perception is a part of it, then we can start going into solutions to start support that child or yourself as an adult. I know I've worked a lot on cognitive flexibility. I'm going to say too, growing up, I thought outside the box a lot, and my parents didn't. And anything that was outside of the box, I was put down for, or I was told that wasn't okay or wasn't acceptable, that I learned that like there was only one way to do things. And so I learned that from a very young age, and I had to really work on that and change that because of how much I was put down and ridiculed as a child for those things. And it's so fascinating. Like that is my one thing where I learned from a young age that I couldn't change my mind, because if I changed my mind on something, then I'd be ridiculed for it and put down. So that caused a lot of my cognitive flexibility. So cognitive flexibility can come from traumas. And if we think about this as well with kids, let's say a child is really good at doing something and they're always good. And then all of a sudden they go to school and they might be really good at doing things up until a certain age. And all of a sudden they find that something is hard for them. If something happens that's too fast, too soon, or they're not ready for it, it can become a trauma. And when something becomes a trauma, you get these protectors. If you go back to my IFS, my internal family systems trauma series, I think it's in the 40s of the podcast. If you go back to that and you look at the traumas, these parts kick in that are like, okay, I'm going to protect you from having this again. And that's where perfectionism can come in. That's where they're like, oh, no, because somebody yelled at you when you made a mistake, all mistakes are bad. So you can't make mistakes, and we're going to put that pressure on you. Or perfectionism. No, you've always been able to do things right. So you can't do things wrong. So you have to do everything perfect. And that's one thing too. Like as parents, sometimes we're always congratulating our kids for all the great things that they're doing. And then all of a sudden they can't do something and they're like, my parents not going to, this part kicks in, this trauma kicks in that I'm not going to be living up to my parents' standards of me, or what my parents expect of me, even though the parents on their end are just proud of their child and they're talking, even though they know their child makes mistakes, because they never talk about the child's mistakes and they never talk about them in a way that is accepting and okay and learning and, growth. They just don't talk about them. It's kind of implied that mistakes are okay. But the children hear them talking to other people about the child's successes. The child may think all of a sudden, once they have a mistake, oh my gosh, that's bad. And a trauma can also kick in. So you can have these trauma responses as well that breed into perfectionism and this cognitive inflexibility. Attention is another one. We need to focus on new information or a new challenge sometimes, and our attention might be so hyper focused. So we might be so hyper focused on this is the solution, and we may be just pushing buttons and pushing buttons and pushing buttons and nothing's happening, or keep doing it the same way and getting the same result, because our focus is so hyper focused on that one way that we're not able to take that step back and look at our attention and say, are there actually other ways of doing this? Can we focus on something else? Where can our attention be instead? And this actually breeds to one of my favorite books. I'm going to write this down so that we put it in the show notes. So it's called Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. Okay, let me write this down. This is for these show notes on cognitive flexibility. Okay, so Dan and Chip Heath, basically what they say is when there's a problem, you go in and you actually figure out what is already working. Where is somebody actually already solving this problem? And what are they doing correctly? Instead of going through and saying, what mistakes are we making and how do we fix them? We can go in and actually go, what is already working and how can we build on that? I know Google does this. I mean, it's phenomenal. And so it's, where's your attention? Where is your attention on this, on the situation that happened, in order for you to have more flexibility in your thinking? Then we dive into working memory. Working memory holds and processes the visual in your mind. So if you struggle to have a visual in your mind of every time you were pouring hot chocolate from the pot, I make mine in a pot. Every time you do it from the pot into the bowl, the way that you do it is spilling it. If you don't have that visual in your brain, every time you're going to continue to do the same thing, which can look like cognitive inflexibility, because you actually do not have that visual in your brain. Also, if you're not able to hold in your brain the visual of how other people do things, so let's even say how somebody does, I'm blanking, how somebody does the dishes. There are so many different ways that people can do the dishes, so many different ways. And if we don't have a vision in our brain of all the different ways that somebody could do the dishes, and we think there's only one way to do it, then we will stay so inflexible in our thinking on that. Same thing with solutions. If we are not observing and we're not able to keep in our brain all of the different ways that somebody has solved a problem, then we're going to think that there's only one way to do something. And then that gets us to our last one, which is inhibition. Inhibition is where we pause and we can stop ourselves and go, whoa, like this is where I was saying before, if your tension is hyper-focused, you need to focus and go stop yourself and say, whoa, am I really continuing to do the same thing that's not working? So you need to pause and stop yourself from the hyper-focus in order to let go of the rigid thinking. So there are times I catch myself where I'm like, whoa, I'm really set on this one thing. Let me stop and think, are there actually other ways of doing this? I do this with my husband all the time. So you'll find this in a relationship in your home where you feel that the way that the bathroom needs to be cleaned, or the way that things need to be put away, or the way that you're parenting your children needs to just be this one way. And I'm so guilty of this. And so with my husband, sometimes I think that there's only one way to do things, that I'll get upset at him or bothered if he's doing something a different way with my kids. And I have to actually put this inhibition in place and pause and stop and think, wait, yeah, he's doing it different than me, but is he doing it wrong? And it's really helping to see that there are different ways of doing things. So executive functioning, this is one I've gone through with every single executive functioning lesson, is understanding that we can work on some of these things, and then we find ourselves in a different situation, a different growth stage, a different stage of life, where either we're being thrown different thoughts, ideas, opinions, or our executive functioning, our whole body is being taxed different. And these executive functioning skills might start to struggle. So we may find that all of a sudden our child is being surrounded by a different group of friends that have a very one-sided view of an opinion, and they may become very cognitively inflexible on that topic. They may get into politics in a very certain way and become so inflexible on their views or their thoughts. There might be something in school, like I know different schools have different focus attentions, and they may become so focused on the way that the school thinks about one thing that they become very inflexible. So you might see this actually happen in college when they do go to certain colleges, and they become involved with a certain group that has a very firm, strong thinking on one thing, that they become very cognitive inflexible at thinking outside of the box on that. And so that starts everything with this. It's the same thing as to when a child is struggling with this. It goes back to perception, attention, nonverbal working memory, and inhibition on all of these things. So it's very important to understand, where is this child struggling? Is it that they're very hyper-focused, their attention is only on this one way of thinking? So we're going to do the intake form questions. These are the intake form that I have linked in all of the other executive functioning series show notes. I have it all over in the support circle. This form is a beast. It is every single executive functioning skill with about 15 to 20 questions for every skill. I do not recommend that you go into this form and you try to tackle the whole thing at once. It's a beast. It's a ridiculous number of pages. I'm just going to let you know. This, though, is super helpful for those that are in my support circle to be going in and checking to see if they're learning about different executive functioning skills and going, oh, let me go check all these intake forms and see these questions and see where my child lands. You can start seeing that one of the skills is where, you really hits a button with you and you're like, oh yeah, this is the one that stresses me out every single day with this child. And we can start breaking it down, and I can start helping you in the group with going through that as well. It helps you see through a different lens that struggle that the child is having is actually executive functioning, and it helps take some pressure off of you. You start supporting and helping your child differently than you're helping now, with less frustration. So let's dive into these questions that we have in the intake form for cognitive flexibility. When we're doing this, it's a statement, and you answer it with always, sometimes, never, or in the past. And as we said, within the past, it might creep up again. So that's good information for you to know too, that if it's in the past now, but it creeps up again, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. This is going to wonder if my child's stressed or what's going on and what piece is really affecting them. All right. So intake form questions. Tends to be a concrete, literal thinker, having difficulty with abstract concepts or ideas. This is my son. Remember how I've said, like, it's a spoon, it's a plate. There's many things too. He's like, well, you didn't say this. I'm like, but you knew what I meant. Like, I might say the wrong word. It's like, you said the wrong word, or you didn't say it exactly how they said it. That is cognitive inflexibility. And oh man, if you have a child like this, my heart goes out to you. I'm giving you the biggest hug right now. And I'm letting you know you're not alone. And it can be frustrating. And it's fascinating that as I've been working on this with my son, like, he still will say sometimes, you didn't say this. And I'm like, and I'll in the past, I would have had to say, you're right. And now I say, You knew what I meant. And sometimes he'll shrug and he'll go, yeah, I did. And we leave it at that. And he's correcting me less and less. So it's fascinating. We're making steps. The next one, struggles with answering questions that require multiple responses or thinking beyond the obvious. So if there is not just one answer, then it can really throw a child off. And this can affect meltdowns in class, meltdowns with their friends. It can affect social relationships when there could be multiple responses, or they need to think beyond the obvious answer. They may really struggle to do that. Has strong specific ideas about how people should think, feel, or act, and struggle to entertain other points of views. Oh, I'm going to tell you, this was me as a parent when I started, before I realized that my kids were totally different from one another, and all kids are different from one another. When I realized how different everybody's parenting styles were, and that it was okay. I used to judge when a child would be yelling in a parent's face. I used to judge when kids did anything that were in my thing out of character or out of behavior or not respectful to somebody. And I now see it so differently. And I don't judge people. Like, it's fascinating because my husband used to be the least judgmental of us. And now I am like, hey, that was judgmental. Like, we really don't know what that person is thinking or feeling or what got them to that point of view. And he's starting to see that as well. But it is so fascinating when they have very strong specific ideas on how people should think, feel, or act, and struggle to entertain any other point of view. And when you are their parent and they have such strong views, yes, those strong views are going to carry them in life. Yes, those views or that personality is really going to help them with certain things in life, but it can also, when it's to such an extreme, get them into trouble. Has difficulty debating multiple sides of a topic and tends to stick to one perspective. This is something we've started doing in our house. Is I started asking them questions like, well, like, so Pokemon came out with a new rule set this year. And I'm like, tell me all the good things about the new rule set. And now tell me the bad. I'm like, now tell me the good things about the old rule set and tell me the bad. And they're starting to see that there's good and bad in both, and that not one is perfect. And it's fascinating because in conversations that we do have now, sometimes they'll point out, well, there's different sides to this, or it's fascinating because my child never would have done that a few years ago. Often gets stuck in one way of thinking and struggles to consider others' perspectives. Yeah, where they really cannot see your side at all. This is my son with getting in trouble. If he recognizes that what he did was wrong and bad, he will hands down take the punishment, no problem, or the consequences or the talking to about, hey. If he does not feel at all like he was in the wrong, like he did anything bad, he will fight. He will argue with you on it at all. I've learned, though, how to have those conversations with him to get him to start seeing the other side a little bit. And because we've worked on his cognitive flexibility, he can. But yeah, it would be fascinating. As soon as I would see him start getting really mad when you would start talking to him about something he just did as action, I'm like, oh, he views deep down into his core that he did nothing wrong. So I need to start asking him about that first before I can dive into him even seeing that there's another way. Struggles to easily put themselves in someone else's shoes and see things from their perspective. I used to be so bad at this, and now I'm amazing at this. I'm going to say great, because I don't think anybody's amazing. Like, I'm still going to struggle with certain people for sure. But now when people are reacting certain ways and it, pings on me, I'm like, I don't know their story. I don't know where they're coming from. This was actually working with first responders was huge in helping me with this one, because I didn't think of their perspective ever when they're on calls and always being spit on and always being they're never wanted on a call, of how that actually wears on them. And fascinating, a lot of them, like why they started doing what they did, why they became first responders, learning their history, their stories behind it all, their childhood stories as to why now they feel they need to go in and help everybody, even when there's bullets flying at them, was super fascinating to go and see that. And working with people with PTSD. When they have PTSD and traumas, their reactions are usually so extreme, and starting to understand their traumas and what got them there and their points of view, it really, really helped me see things in someone else's shoes and see things from another perspective. That doesn't always mean that I have to agree with their perspective or their side or what they're thinking or doing or their actions. It's just seeing it from somebody else's shoes and seeing things from a different perspective. The next question is, has difficulty thinking of an idea, topic, or discussion in a different way? Now, this is my other son in a fascinating way. I spoke of this in the last episode. I've had teachers come to me 3 times for him, amazing teachers that are usually good at getting kids to do anything, like phenomenal teachers. And they couldn't get him to start an assignment. Twice it was the same assignment, once in kindergarten, once in grade 4, where he was to mix animals together. And one was draw the picture, one was kind of, what would you call it? What would you call an animal if it was mixed together? And my son couldn't do this because he was thinking of it in a different way. He could not combine 2 animals, because if 2 animals are real, well, the tail of a lion is this, the tail of a beaver is that, right? It's just fascinating. He couldn't do that. And another assignment was where he had to imagine this is for geography, he had to imagine that he had traveled somewhere and he was writing me a postcard. And he's like, well, first off, he doesn't travel without me. So how could he do that? If it was an imaginary place, how could he tell me and lie to me that he had not done it? And how could he, there was another one too. He was really struggling with so much of this assignment because he could not be flexible and think about fiction. This is a kid that did not read fiction until grade 4, until one of these teachers actually got him into Roald Dahl. And now this kid loves mysteries and fictions and science fiction and mythical creatures and mythology, like all these things, just loves it, and can come up with creative things now, whereas he couldn't when he was younger because he could not think of an idea, topic, or discussion in a different way. It's fascinating. Another one is where they can get stuck on word choices and struggles to easily reword a sentence when necessary. They're like, nope, this has to be this word. This is the only word it can be. And my son does that to me all the time. So with this one as well, next question is, they struggle to reword something when asked for clarification. So they keep telling you it in the same way all the time, instead of realizing that you're not understanding how they said it and changing the way that they're saying it, changing it from a different lens or different view or different words or different explanations. The next one is that they have difficulty adapting when someone else makes a mistake or when a group activity changes directions. This can cause so many meltdowns in school. This is one of the reasons why I had to take my son out of school, is he could not handle this at all. And he did not understand why kids were making mistakes, why they didn't know answers to questions, why they couldn't do things that he could do. Or he would have, you've done this where you've been in groups and somebody was so inflexible in their thinking that it had to be their way, or, you couldn't move forward as a team. This happens in the workforce as well. The next question is, struggles to think of alternative solutions when faced with a problem. And that's where I was explaining before too. My son will just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and won't stop and go, okay, this isn't working. What's another way that we can solve this? He never used to. He's getting much better. And it's fascinating though, because there's other times where he can come up with some really amazing different solutions, like crazy out of the box solutions that nobody would ever thought of that are brilliant. And there's other times where he's so in the moment that he can't refocus his attention to do that. Next question, has difficulty transitioning easily from one activity to another when given notice ahead of time. They're very inflexible about switching of the task. They just can't do it. This is huge with screens with kids as well. Next question, struggles to manage situations where they must stop one activity and start another unexpectedly. Oh, did I just double do that? No, that's almost the same. Oh, this is where they have to stop one or start another unexpectedly. So if maybe somebody comes in the room and makes them, like a teacher or a principal will come into the room and has to stop what they're doing and go to do something else. It's like go with them, or maybe they have to go to the office, or, they can't do it. The next one, has difficulty dealing with unexpected interruptions and struggles to shift back to the original task after. This one I do find with. I find if somebody comes in and interrupts me while I'm in the middle of a flow, that I really, really struggle to get back to the other thing after. And I've had to work at that and develop skills and tools. And if we do think of those kindling skills that we talked about at the start, I struggle with my attention going back to it and inhibiting myself from moving on to all kinds of other things. My brain is usually firing like crazy on all kinds of ideas or different things from what that person said, that I struggle to get back into that flow. Struggles with changes and adapting to new circumstances, has difficulty handling situations where they need to adjust plans, like changing a project after receiving feedback. So they've submitted their first draft and somebody has given them changes and they freak out because they may have to change a lot of what they're doing, or they have to go into a different direction and they're like, oh my God, I cannot do that. Also, if something breaks, or when you're doing Lego and you're building a platform and the platform's not going the way that you need it, and you have to switch the plan for that project, that can send one kid over heels. My son never did Lego. My one never ever did Lego. And it was a perfectionism thing. Becomes upset when things don't go as expected or planned. Has difficulty adapting to new rules or guidelines in games or social settings. Ooh, this is where you will find with a child with cognitive flexibility, right or wrong, win or lose, right? Like they have to always win. They can't adjust the rules and regulations, like have to be almost their rules and can't be the new rules or the way that the game has outlined them. They may not like that. Has trouble going with the flow and prefers to stay as planned. My son used to, sometimes he'll do it. What are we doing tomorrow? When are we doing this? Like if we are doing something where he knows where we're like going to his grandparents or we're going over to do something that's different, when is it happening? When do we start? When does this happen? He has to almost know it because the plan freaks him out. And not knowing the plan, not having, he needs to know when things are going to happen, when and why, when it's something new. It used to be with everything. Now it's just with new. Needs repeated requests to stop activities like playing video games, putting away toys, Legos, or stopping a focused task. That can be cognitive inflexibility. They're inflexible on stopping what they're doing and going to do something else. All right. So that was the questions from the intake form. The list is down below. The link is in the show notes. If you're in the support circle, the links are everywhere. Again, remember that form is a beast. Just go through, like if you want to just go through these cognitive flexibility questions, just go through and find the section with cognitive flexibility and just fill out those. Do bit and piece at a time because it's a very overwhelming form. So now I just want to share one really quick strategy. In order to help with a child that struggles with making mistakes. My question is, how often do you verbalize your mistakes to your child? Often we don't. And honestly, when you start doing it, it sounds so silly. It's really, really silly. But if you start modeling how you handle your own mistakes and show them that it's okay to make errors by saying something like, you know, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me try it again. Or, oh, I'm so frustrated because what I'm doing isn't working. I think I need to stop and think about a different way to do this because the way I'm doing this is not working and I'm frustrated right now. So talking about your emotions and how you're handling things. Oops, I just spilt my coffee. I'm running late. This is stressing me out. I'm getting really angry and frustrated myself, but I need to know that I just need to stop and pause, clean this up, get myself another cup, and I'll be fine. So it's just really important to start, modeling it for your kids. Sports. My husband and I play beach volleyball, and we used to drag the kids to the beach when we were younger, which now they don't like the beach so much. But fascinatingly, my son lost a game in something. And I said something to him about like, well, we don't always win. And he goes, but you and dad do. And I go, do you really think that we win all of our games? He goes, yeah. I'm like, oh. So I started after that. I'd go, when we go off the court, I'd tell him the score and I'd tell him how the game goes. I'm like, that was such a fun game. I really enjoyed it. We didn't win. The score was really close. It was a good game. Or, oh man, it was a blowout. I just couldn't get my feet under me. I had timing mistakes. I I think I need to just rest for a little bit before I go back and play again. And I would talk to him about that after. So he started actually realizing how we experienced it and how we struggled and how it was for us. So he could actually start understanding all the emotions that were involved in it and could start getting, little pieces in his brain of the emotions involved, little pieces in their brain of it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay that you can still have fun in a game and lose. And that's where he didn't understand at the start. He goes, but you always have fun. I'm like, yeah, I love to play, but I don't always win. And it's about really just going out there and doing my best. And he didn't know that because we weren't saying it out loud. We assumed that he saw it and he knew exactly what was happening, but he didn't. His perception wasn't the same as what was really happening, and his attention was on different things in the game. Because we were happy, his perception was that we were winning. And so it's really been huge for helping him with that, is us talking about it more verbally when we're making mistakes, when we're winning or losing, when we're, something isn't going the way that we had it planned, is really talking it out with him and working it out. These are the things that in the support circle that I do start teaching. And so for all of these executive functioning skills, I bring in little pieces like this of what they can be doing and how they can model it for their kids, or different ways with each skill that they can be helping support their child. That's what I do in the support circle. So cognitive flexibility definitely isn't a one size fits all. It shows up differently for every child. What I just gave you is one support tool. It's a framework and a support tool that I do give to parents in the support circle, but there are other frameworks. There's other ways that we can be helping kids based on what their cognitive flexibility struggles are. I mean, I told you in this episode too about my two kids and how cognitive flexibility has affected both of them in different ways. So this episode is the very last skill that I am going to be covering in this podcast series. The rest of the executive functioning skills, the rest of the log skills, the rest of the flame skills, along with tailored guidance for your unique solution, will be exclusively available in the support circle. So click the link below if you'd like to join. It's a very minimal monthly fee. Hop in, stay for a month, stay for a couple of years, stay until you work through something with your son. And when you need a break, you can hop out and then you hop back in when your child gets to another stage and you are ready to start diving into more things. Come and go as you please in the support circle. We are there to support you, and I look forward to seeing you there. And if you really did miss out on the other episodes of this executive functioning series, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to those. And I will hopefully see you in the support circle. If not, I will definitely see you next week in our next podcast episode. See you there.